Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So a buddy of mine, a classmate from Harvard Business School, bragged on his LinkedIn that his even smarter brother, because this guy was one of the smartest guys in my class, if not the smartest guy in my class, he said his even smarter brother had just issued a book, and he was bragging about it as being a great book on explaining launching technology businesses. And so I want to introduce you today. He's also a Harvard grad, graduated, Shirish, a year before Girish and me?
That's correct, yes, in 87.
Unbelievable. Shirish Nadkarni. He is a serial tech entrepreneur, and he's an author of the book From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your technology business. Shirish, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
So tell me, why did you write this book?
Well, for the last 5 years, I've been spending a lot of time working with entrepreneurs, with startup founders, and I mentor founders, mentor startups. And I was seeing the same kinds of questions coming up, the same kinds of issues coming up. And I started blogging about it first. And then I thought that it would be helpful if I actually captured all my learnings. I've done 3 different startups, 2 of which had successful exit, 1 of which failed. So I've had both success and failure, and have learned a lot of lessons along the way. And so I thought it would be really useful to share some of my learnings in this book.
Fantastic. Have you written before?
No, this is my except for writing blogs and so forth and emails. This is the first time I've written a book.
When did you start writing blogs?
I started writing in 2019.
And why were you motivated to write blogs? For the same reason?
For the same reasons, and I got a lot of good feedback. I wrote 15 different articles, and then decided, hey, there's a lot more to talk about, and would be useful to capture my learnings in the form of a book.
So tell us a little bit about the learnings. Can you give us a sense of some of the learnings? Do you have like a top 10 mistakes not to make?
Absolutely. One of the key things that I emphasize to startup founders is to really focus on making sure that you have product market fit.
You have product
market fit.
Right.
Before you actually spend money on marketing your product, you have to make sure that
people want to buy it.
Yeah, people want to buy it, that you're really addressing a pain point that is that customers are clamoring for a solution. And oftentimes people think that, hey, I'm a software engineer, I built this great product, and surely people will come from all over the world to buy my solution.
Right.
And then they're disappointed when they go talk to customers that customers have 5 other more pressing problems that they want to solve, and that the problem that you're solving is not really a pressing problem.
So I've done a bunch of startups as well. A lot of them have been in the health sciences area, medical devices, things like that, and some in green tech. My experience is that a lot of scientists and technology people fall in love with their inventions, and the last thing they're going to do is go and find out whether people want to buy it, because they're convinced that people want to buy it because they came up with this brilliant idea, this brilliant technology, this brilliant new product.
Yeah, I see that.
How do you get them to go and find out if there's a product market fit?
So that's what I've been preaching about in talks that I've given, as well as articles I've written, and of course the book, is really take the time to talk to customers. And when you talk to customers, don't tell them what your solution is. First, ask them, what are your top 3 or 5 problems? And understand those problems. And if the problem that you're solving is not one of the top 3 or 5 problems, then you're addressing the wrong problem. Because even though you may address some issue for the customer, it is not a burning issue. And so you are better off actually listening to what problems they are having, that they intend to find a solution, and addressing one of those problems, as opposed to building out a solution first. So that's been my message all along to startup founders. And I try to emphasize that in the workshops that I do and articles that I write and so forth.
You know, Shirish, it's probably good advice for everyone in life to not first offer their solutions, but to listen. I think that people in day-to-day life could heed that advice too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I made that mistake myself. I was my first startup, when I left Microsoft, I thought I had a great product to offer the world. And sure enough, it didn't address a problem that was critical for my customers. And I had to pivot and ultimately find my way to a good solution.
We're chatting tonight with Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial technology entrepreneur, and he's an author of a new book, From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Shirish in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Tonight, we're chatting with Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial tech entrepreneur, author of a book, From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. Shirish, I got to ask you, I joked at the beginning, and it's not a joke. Your brother Girish was brilliant, probably still is brilliant. I interviewed him about alternative energy, as you may know, because you may have seen the interview a couple of weeks ago. The two of you were born in India, grew up in India, and both of you came to the United States for higher education.
That's right.
Tell me about, number one, what it was like growing up in India. Number two, why did you choose, both of you, to come to the US and get into, and how'd you get into Harvard Business School?
Yeah, so as you said, I was born and grew up in India. I was fortunate to have grown up in a middle-class family. My dad was a successful banker, and there was really a lot of focus on, one, learning English, and two, doing well in school and going to the best schools. My dad, in fact, would talk to us in English at home because he knew it was important for us to do well in education, in higher education in India, where everything is taught in English. So now, English is my first language for both Girish and I.
I speaking Hindi or what?
At home, we'd speak a different language called Konkani, but really that's not my first language because my parents would speak to us in English growing up, and then I'd go to an English medium school, and we learned English at school. We spoke to each other, spoke to our friends in English, and so became really fluent in English growing up.
Well, they say there's more English speakers in India today than anywhere else in the world.
That's probably true because the middle class in India now is over 300 million, and all of them can speak fairly good English, and English is one of the national languages in India.
Okay, but understanding English, I can understand. Moving at a young age to the United States for higher education, that must have taken some guts.
Definitely. I was always fascinated by the US. I remember, reading about the space program, the Apollo 11 landing on the moon, watching that, on film. My dad used to get Time magazine, Newsweek at home, and I used to read it cover to cover as a teenager. And growing up, I wanted to learn computer science. And at that time, there were not many options to learn computer science in India. And so my only option was to really come to the US and join a university where they had a computer science program.
And where'd you go?
I went to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, which is one of the the top computer science schools in the U.S.
How old were you?
I was 20 years old, so I was still an undergraduate student, which was quite unique. Students at that time from India would come for their graduate education. I came here for my undergraduate education, and I was fortunate actually that Girish, my brother, had started working in a law firm on Wall Street, and he was kind enough to actually pay for my education just after getting his first job, because for undergraduate education there was no scholarship.
Gosh, I knew Girish was smart. I didn't know he was nice too.
Yes, so I owe him a lot. My education in the U.S. would not have been possible without him funding it.
But then you got into Harvard Business School. How was that process?
Well, after graduating from Michigan, I actually worked for a couple of years in the Bay Area, and so got some really good work experience. Got my GMAT, had a good score in GMAT, and applied to Harvard Business School. And amazingly enough, they wanted to accept me. So that was a real surprise, and it was a great experience going to. I was an engineer. Going to Harvard Business School, I knew nothing about business, and you had all these smart students, who went into investment banking and consulting, and who knew all the language of business. And this was the first time I was learning about business, so it was really fascinating for me to go through that experience.
The year you graduated was the year of a big crash on Wall Street. My memory is that some banker regrettably actually threw himself out of a window because the crash was so massive. Did that impact your choice of a career and where you wanted to go?
No, I wanted to pursue a technology career. So fortunately, I got a job at a small company called Microsoft at that time that was peddling MS-DOS. And I moved to Seattle. So the crash did not impact me directly, except my stock options were underwater for quite some time. But fortunately, that corrected itself over time.
You joined Microsoft. Tell me about that experience.
Oh, that was an amazing experience because Microsoft was really at the center of the software universe over time. As I said, when I joined, they were focused on MS-DOS, and they had some applications on MS-DOS. And then over time, they launched Windows 3.0, which finally made Windows successful. And then they launched Office, Windows Word, and Excel, and then combined them into Office and so forth. But really what was fascinating about working in Microsoft was, as a product manager, I would work on a completely new application category. And my category was email software, which did not exist on the PC. And so here I was, 26 years old, launching an entirely new category of email software on the PC platform. So that was really an amazing experience.
God, I can't even remember when I started using email. It seems like it's been around forever. When did email actually become a thing?
I would say probably in the late 90s. One of the things I did at Microsoft was the acquisition of Hotmail. And that's when I remember email really finally taking off, because Hotmail was offering free web-based email.
Yeah. I remember, I think in early 2000s, for sure, having an email, but I don't remember having an email before 2000. Did we in business?
Not in business so much, but as companies connected to the internet, then finally they got a domain name and then started using email. Of course, people were using email for their personal email, on Hotmail or AOL. Or CompuServe or some of the email solutions at that point. So personal email took off first, and then it was followed by business email.
Right. And I got to ask you, did you ever meet Bill Gates?
Yes, actually, I have a story to tell you, which is that his wife, at that time known as Melinda French, she and I joined, we were in the same batch, joining Microsoft as product managers. And she was a product manager on Windows Word, and I was a product manager on Microsoft Mail. And we worked on a joint project to kind of integrate Word and email, and presented to Bill, which was probably the first time that he saw Melinda in a meeting.
And he paid no attention to you.
Yeah, he paid no attention to me. Yeah, exactly.
How long did you stay at Microsoft?
I was there for about 11 years, till 99, and then decided to do my first startup.
And tell us about the first startup.
So I told you about the Hotmail acquisition, and how email was taking off, for consumer usage. And so I thought that email would be useful in a business environment as well, and that businesses would be better off using email in the cloud as opposed to installing a server, backing up the software, installing upgrades, all of that headache. And so really we pioneered the notion of business email in the cloud well before cloud software became popular. So that was the germination of that idea, and that's how I launched my first company.
Awesome. And I understand that BlackBerry bought it?
Yes. So eventually we actually pivoted into mobile email on phones. Phones at that time were offering data capability through something called GPRS. I don't even know if you remember that term, but that was the first internet connectivity that was offered on phones. And so we made it possible for the average phone user to access their email on their phone. And so BlackBerry, which at that time was becoming popular among business users, also wanted a consumer email solution. And so that's what we offered. And they thought it was too strategic for them. And instead of partnering with us, they decided to buy us.
I remember this little BlackBerry pager that I had that hooked onto my belt that I think it had like one row or just a few rows of what you could read.
That's correct. That's right. It was started off as a pager format, and then over time became a PDA form factor. But yes, I remember that early form factor, which is a really small device on your belt.
Have you followed BlackBerry over the years?
Yes, I actually, after my acquisition, I worked for Brim, or at that time, or BlackBerry, for about 3.5 years, and actually got to launch a number of their products. And then saw their, after I left, unfortunately, saw their demise at the hands of iPhone and Android.
Why did they fail? They were so successful for such a long time and successful in a brand new industry.
For a number of reasons. The founders of BlackBerry were really smart people, but when they saw the iPhone for the first time, iPhone was really more of a personal computer on your phone versus an email device. And they felt that the iPhone would not succeed. That the idea of typing on a glass keyboard was simply laughable, and that battery life was so important for mobile devices that running a computer on a small mobile device would eat up the battery really quickly. And so they thought their approach with a keyboard with great battery life would continue to be successful. And then iPhone turned out to be a lot more successful than they thought. And it took them quite a long time for them to come up with their own response. And by then it was too late.
It's interesting because we talked about how scientists, technology, inventors, et cetera, can come up with these brilliant ideas that are new, but often they're myopic into how new competitors can destroy them. And you take a look at sort of the history of technology that have become great. They've often ended up getting beaten by someone else new. What is it?
I think what I've seen is that most of the time there is some kind of a technology shift that happens. Whether it's from the PC to the internet or internet to mobile, right? And what happens is the incumbents are too enamored with their solution, and the customers are asking for, faster horses instead of thinking about, how the technology shift, can enable completely new solutions that did not exist before. And so the companies that take advantage of the new platforms, the new technologies, are the ones that succeed, because those technologies then get adopted by consumers, and the incumbents who are working on improving their last generation technology get left behind. So that's what happened with the BlackBerry example. You had Palm, which was very successful as a handheld device, but when the shift happened to mobile, BlackBerry kind of crushed them because they developed a great email device. And then over time, mobile really took off, and then iPhone came out and provided a small computer on your mobile device, right? And that took off and killed the email only type of solution. And so we've seen time and time again new players who take advantage of some new technology that the incumbents fail to really understand and appreciate.
And the example lots of people use is Kodak and Polaroid, that they didn't invent the digital camera, even though they were predominant in the photography business. What's gonna if anything supplant Apple and the iPhone?
Well, again, you'll see technology evolution happening as we speak. Some of the trends that I'm watching are the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Google seems to have a lead in that area, and so the more things that can be automated, on your phone, your ability to use voice more effectively with your phone as opposed to typing on a keyboard, etc.
So my daughter is constantly talking into her wristwatch.
Yes.
And so when you say BlackBerry didn't anticipate people typing on a screen, are we not going to be typing anymore? Are we going to just be talking to a wristwatch?
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen some futuristic movies, you could envision that whether it's a wristwatch or some device that you clip to your ear, or whatever, or smart earphones, you could be simply interacting with a smart assistant that understands who you are, what your preferences are, what your desires are, and can get things done because it understands what you're trying to accomplish. So I can certainly envision that future happening, where the phone simply disappears into earpods in your ear, for example.
So the first rule that we talked about was that you've got to understand the product market fit.
Yes.
This rule is what? That you got to understand competition?
That you have to understand technology platform shifts.
Technology platform shifts.
Right. So anytime there's new technology that emerges, there are new ways to do things, there are new opportunities to exploit. And if you're not the first to exploit those opportunities, then you'll be left behind. And so you have to watch out for those new technologies, and even if the adoption is very small, things can change very rapidly. And if you're too late, then other players can take over your business.
We're chatting tonight about technology and startups of technology with Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial tech entrepreneur. He's the author of From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. Shirish, if people want to buy your book, how do they get it?
Well, the number of bookstores that offer the book. So today, for example, on Amazon, you can go search for my book and you can pre-order it today. And it will be released on August 24th. So, please go ahead and order the book if you're interested.
We're chatting with Shirish, and we're going to take a break and come back, and we're going to ask him a little bit more about his second company that he launched, which was in the language business. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with the brother of a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial tech entrepreneur, and he's an author of a book, From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. It launches in August, and you can buy it on Amazon. And if you're interested in technology and starting a business in technology, sounds like a book that you should want to read. So the first rule that we talked about, Shirish, was ensure product market fit. The second is ensure that you understand technology paradigm shifts, I guess, is one way that I describe it. Your third business was in the language learning space, I understand. What did you learn there?
What was exciting about that company, which is called Live Mocha, was that we pioneered the notion of social language learning, where everyone was both a student and a teacher at the same time. So let's say you were a U.S., a North American, person learning Spanish. A Spanish speaker could help you learn the language, and in return, you could help somebody in China learn English. And that concept really took off very rapidly, and we grew to over 15 million members in 200 different countries around the world,
Awesome.
Mostly through word of mouth.
And so what did you learn?
What I learned was that, first of all, that people are very proud of their language, their culture. They are very happy to help other people learn about their language and culture, and that language learning in many parts of the world is critical to advancing yourself in your career. I mentioned to you, for example, that my dad would insist that we speak English at home. Same thing's true in China or Brazil, where parents will spend up to 10% of their income on educating their kids, making sure that they learn English so that they can really advance their careers as they grow up.
I think one of the other things that I would have learned from that is the power of network economies, and what you're doing with social learning, the way you described it, really is aren't you using that power of a network? It's just not one-to-one, but it's one-to-many, and that interaction really helps.
Absolutely. So Live Mocha was a perfect example of the concept of network effects, where there was a virtuous kind of cycle of more people coming on to Live Mocha because there were more language learners that they could interact with. They were not learning by themselves; they were learning with other people who could help them learn a certain language, and it became really a virtuous cycle that allowed us to grow very rapidly, and became a significant competitive advantage because once you grow to 15 million people around the world, it's very hard for a new network to emerge,
right,
and compete against you.
And what happened to that? Did you exit it?
Yes, we were ultimately acquired by Rosetta Stone, which is one of the premier language learning companies in the US.
Yep, fantastic. And did you stay with that firm?
No, I started my another company after that in the mobile shopping space. Unfortunately, that was not a success for me. But hey, you have to try new ideas, and sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail.
Wasn't there a song "2 out of 3 Ain't Bad" by Meatloaf or something like that?
Probably, I'm not very familiar with that song.
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, that's right.
So I read a fascinating book you may be familiar with called Homo Deus, written by an Israeli author who also wrote a book called Homo Sapiens. And he talked about network economics and how technology was going to change. And it was an interesting sort of formula to me. He said the key is, number one, you've got to have connections. And then you got to have connections to a number of other connections. And then you got to have diverse connections. And then you got to have strong, the strong link between all those connections. So it was the number of connections, the number of different connections, the number of connections between the connections, the diversity of those connections, and the thickness of the connections to those connections. Mm-hmm. And he used that to say, you think about Facebook or maybe your language learning business, that, number one, you got to have people. But then number two, those people have to be connected to as many other people as possible. And then they got to be different people. They can't just be all the same people. And then the relationships have to be thicker than just a casual introduction. They got to be stronger than that. Does that help you understand network economies or the network effect any?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that does, make a lot of sense. Though I don't think it's necessary for all three conditions to be necessarily true. Amazon, for example, has a huge marketplace, which is a networked economy. And Amazon is successful because they have millions of consumers coming to their site that suppliers want to or sellers want to sell to, and then the sellers are there because the buyers are there, and so forth. So you don't necessarily need to have connections between sellers or between sellers themselves or between consumers themselves. If you have strong connection between one end of the spectrum with other sets of folks, you can still have a very successful network economy.
So one of the other lessons that I sort of learned, excuse me, in the biotech life sciences space was this sort of typical, I think they called it Valley of Despair. And in the tech world, I think they've used other names for it, but that so many different technology businesses go through this time period of low cash and challenges, and you got to be able to jump across that cavern to get to the other side. What do you think of that?
It depends on the type of company and the technology that they're embracing. Generally, what I've found is that once it's very challenging to get from 0 to 1 million, and then from 1 million to 10 million in revenue. But it turns out that once you get to 10 million of revenue, generally it's a lot easier to get to 100 million of revenue.
Really?
That's data that I've heard about. And so the challenges are mostly initially where you have to establish product market fit. You have to have a sales motion that is successful and is capturing customers in a cost-efficient manner. But once you have established both product market fit as well as a sales motion that is efficient in capturing customers, and that your lifetime value of customer is significantly greater than your cost of acquisition, then that cycle keeps going. And if it's a networked economy that you are participating in, then that virtuous cycle can really take you with tremendous force.
Sounds like you've had a great education in technology, and it's wonderful that you've written the book. Do you do talks as well?
Yes, I do do a number of talks. I talk about how to achieve product market fit. I talk about how to raise money from investors. I've raised over 30 million in funding in both the worst of times and the best of times. So I have some lessons learned that I can share with individuals. So
tell us a little bit about that. How do you raise money from individuals?
I talk about both individuals and venture capital.
Okay, both venture capital and private equity and individuals. How do you raise money?
Right. The first thing I tell people is that you really have to tell a story. It's not just a set of facts about your company and features and so forth. You have to tell a story about some transformation that is happening today that is requiring your solution. So in my case, for example, with Limoca, I talked about the notion of globalization. This was in 2007 timeframe, where globalization was a key buzzword, right? And that globalization was happening all over the world, that people wanted to learn English in China and India and Brazil to improve their lives and so forth, and that there would be 1 billion plus people who would be learning English. So that was the vision that I was trying to paint in the minds of the VCs and get them to see this not as some small product, but something that could eventually become a large company.
So it's a story that isn't an elevator pitch the way some people describe it, but a story of how you can change people's lives that people can really grab onto?
Yes, and you have to answer the key question, why now? Right? What's about that paradigm shift or the transformation that's happening today that you are the only one to take advantage of that? So that's one of the key things I talk about, is telling that story. And then secondly, I talk about the importance of highlighting the traction that you've received to prove that it's not just vaporware, that you have real customers who are super happy with your solution. If you can tell those two components well, then your chances of raising money are significantly higher.
Do people invest in this paradigm shift, the story, or the traction that you've talked about, or the team, or the product?
VCs generally invest, they say they invest first in teams. I generally believe that's to be the case, that you have to be an A-plus team, but not just an A-plus team, but an A-plus team that has a deep understanding of the market and the problem that they're trying to address. So you have to really impress people, not just with your credentials that you went to MIT or Harvard Business School or Stanford or whatever, but that you really understand this domain super well, and you can see 5 years ahead when most people don't really understand the future. And that's really what goes into understanding, which team is really strong. And then it's, really convincing them that this is a big idea, that this is a big market, that it can be $1 billion company in the future.
I'm going to paraphrase Warren Buffett, probably not anywhere close to what he actually said, but I think he said something like, I'd rather have a B product with an A team than an A product with a B or a C team.
Yes, that makes sense, because an A team will find a way to pivot. So if the B product is not working, they'll figure it out quickly, and they will spend the time understanding the customer issues, and they'll figure out how to pivot and finally find a solution that meets the market needs. So that's why I would still go with the A team.
Pivot is one of those words that I've heard a million times more this year, just like you're on mute, than almost any other word. And it seems to be like the word of COVID. And it used to be that if you want to be successful, you've got to be committed to something and, hit your head against a brick wall till it breaks kind of attitude. And now this year it's been, you got to pivot. Explain what pivot is.
Pivoting is really a process of understanding your customers' needs and whether your solution addresses those needs. So as I said, sometimes technologists make the mistake of thinking they understand the customer problem. They build a solution without really validating it. And then when the product hits the market, they find out that they missed the mark. And then it dawns on them to really go understand the customer problem and figure out what is it that what is it that they built. Is there some nugget that customers are gravitating towards? I'll give an example. Instagram, for example, really started off as an application called Bourbon that was about location sharing. And unfortunately for them, there were a number of location sharing apps like Foursquare and others that were already in the market. And what they discovered was really that people were sharing pictures about locations, and that's really what was capturing people's imagination. So they basically took that app and stripped away all that functionality and then simply focused on a simple, easy to use, photo sharing applications with, filters to make those photos really come alive. And that was really the change, the pivot that they made to that made Instagram ultimately successful.
It seems, you talked about new paradigm shifts. It seems like TikTok is taking over Instagram. Do you think it's going to kill Instagram?
Not completely. I think there are two different scenarios that are being addressed. Instagram is really doing a good job of, sharing, photographs of, moments in life, whereas TikTok is all about entertainment value. Instagram is now trying to compete with TikTok by providing their own TikTok-like feature called Reels. But I suspect because of the network, economies of scale, that they will fail in their endeavor. And you will have two user scenarios. One is photo sharing, which is Instagram, and the other one is entertaining videos, which is TikTok. And Instagram will fail in their effort to compete with TikTok, but they'll still, live on as a photo sharing application.
It's fascinating. What technology do you see today that you just love?
I love my mobile phone. I use my mobile phone more than I use my my laptop, and it's fascinating to see new applications emerge over time that really take advantage of this platform. And in many parts of the world, most people don't even have a laptop or a PC. Their only computing device is the phone. And so I see the phone really as the center of the universe for some time to come.
So, I working from home and in my office have 2 or 3 screens. So not only do I use a laptop, but I've got so much going on, I got to have other screens open at the same time. Right. Why can't a phone have another screen open up?
There's no reason why that couldn't happen in the future. I mean, you could certainly. I mean, you can certainly connect an iPad today, to another screen and project on that screen. You can do the same with the phone as well, though it's not as easy. But eventually, you'll have holographic displays, which will be either. You'll have glasses, and you have Google, trying their hand at it. There's a rumor that Apple will come out with glasses. So your second screen might actually be your glasses.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating. We're chatting tonight about technology and how technology companies can best be managed. We've got with us Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial tech entrepreneur. He's an author of From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. You can buy it at Amazon. It launches in August. We're going to take a break and come back with some final comments from Shirish in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Shirish Nadkarni. He's a serial tech entrepreneur and author of From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. It's available wherever good books are sold, including Amazon, and it's launching in August. So get your pre-orders in. Shirish, I got to ask you, you and your brother Girish have both been extremely successful. You grew up in India. You had a middle-class family upbringing. Your father persuaded you to learn English. You decided you wanted to come to the United States for higher education. Girish became a lawyer, went to Harvard Business School, is now an executive with a big oil and gas company. And you got a technology undergrad and then went to Harvard Business School and then went to Microsoft and launched 3 different tech companies and now are writing a book on technology. You've both been very successful. When you think about the challenge that people from immigrants coming to Canada or the United States have, diverse communities, diverse people, what have you learned? What lessons have you learned about that you could tell people about how to be successful?
Well, first of all, I would say that, North Americans, whether it's, US-based folks or Canadian, I've interacted with Canadian companies like BlackBerry as well, that these countries are amazingly open to immigrants, providing opportunities that would be unheard of in many other parts of the world. For me to come from India with a lot of money and get a great education is something that this country should be proud about. So that's one of the key lessons, the key things that I would share with people is that despite the challenges of race and so forth that we still face in this country, America is still a very open country, very welcoming of immigrants, and got many opportunities because of that openness that I've experienced.
Not sure if you ever heard of a business school professor by the name of Richard Florida, who has written a lot of books, one of them called My City. And he talks about economic development success in cities. And he says that the keys are the 3 T's: tech, talent, and tolerance. And tech, I guess you have lived it. Talent would be the team that we've also discussed. But tolerance, I thought, was a little bit surprising. And he sort of said the same thing that you said, is that, and he used the comparison, he said, the Bay Area, which is very tolerant to immigrants and diverse people. And he used the quote that more than 60% of startups in Silicon Valley were started up by at least one of the partners being an immigrant in the United States on a student or exchange visitor visa, versus Detroit, where the car companies were typically all run by people that look sort of more like me than you, certainly. Do you agree with that? Tech, talent, and tolerance?
Definitely, and there has been an evolution. I mean, I came here in the '80s, but there were many Indian immigrants who came to this country in the '60s and '70s, and they had somewhat of a harder challenge. I remember a talk that a successful Indian entrepreneur had given about how after raising money, he was told to step aside so that a white executive could become the CEO. And ultimately, it turned out that they had to, go back to the original, founder, because he was the person who could really successfully run the company. But the tolerance has really increased over time as immigrants have proven themselves in a variety of different circumstances that they too can be successful. That they're not just technologists, that they can also be leaders. You now have the phenomena of Indian immigrants running companies like Microsoft and Adobe and Google and so forth, which was unheard of even 20 years ago. So the country has evolved. It has definitely become more tolerant. It was always tolerant, but it has become more tolerant of immigrants over time, and I think that's really helped this country, bring out new startups, new ideas, new technologies that would not have been possible without these immigrants.
Your book is about technology businesses that fail and how not to fail effectively. What percentage of startups succeed and what percentage fail?
It's a very small number that succeed. The saying goes that 9 out of 10 startups fail.
9 out of 10, 90%
right.
fail.
Right. Now, if you look at the stats from a VC's perspective, typically what the stats are more like a VC-funded company, maybe three or four of them will fail out of 10. Another 3 or 4 will return just the money that was invested, and then they will have 1 or 2 major hits where they get 10 to 50 times their return, and those 1 or 2 successes make up for all the failures in their portfolio. So there's a lot of infant mortality for startups, unfortunately.
It's fascinating, and your book goes through some of the keys to success in managing through that process, and product market fit is one of them. And I presume you've got a whole list of other ones, and I look forward to reading them. And I guess the other answer that you've got is team, and
Yes.
And how do you build such a strong team?
It starts first with your co-founder, finding somebody. In my case, I was a business person. I needed to find a technical co-founder. And what you need to look for is somebody who is ready to roll up their sleeves and is not only a great technologist, but also has a great business mind. And I was really fortunate with the startups that I founded that my co-founders, the CTO that I worked with, were really sharp technologists and had a sharp business mind. And so when it came to really talking through strategy, they were an equal partner with me on that.
It's interesting. So many technology companies really do have co-founders. You think about even Apple and Microsoft, where one person got a lot of the press. They had very strong co-founders. Why is it that you need co-founders?
Most VCs will not fund your company with at least 2 people on the team. And the reason for that is that, it's rare to find somebody who can think through all the problems and the issues and the challenges on their own. You need to have at least one other co-founder, if not multiple co-founders, who can challenge each other on issues, on strategy, on problems to be solved, and come up with the best solutions. So it's good to have people with complementary skills that can work together.
It's interesting. My first job came out of Harvard Business School, was working for the Walt Disney Company, and I worked for a CEO by the name of Michael Eisner. And Eisner ended up writing a book called Partners. And it was because he said that he thought initially that it was all about one individual, but came to realize through his experience that wasn't the case. And he had a team at Disney, including Frank Wells, the president, and Gary Wilson, the CFO, that really acted as three guys that were running the company. And that was successful. And that he also then described that it's got to be someone that doesn't have the same skill base. And he used the example of how he tried to hire a guy by the name of Michael Orvitz, who didn't work out because he was too similar to Michael Eisner. And you really needed people that had different skill bases. And then in this book, Partners, he went through a description of a whole bunch of different companies, some of which I didn't realize, but had, even Berkshire Hathaway that had Warren Buffett, who got a lot of the press, but Charlie, I think it's Munger, who was
yes.
the number two guy, and a whole bunch of companies like that. Do you think that too often people think it's all about them when really they need some help and they need that extra person that's got different skill base?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I look back at my own history, with Microsoft, Microsoft was successful because they had Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and then Steve Ballmer. And for a long time, Bill and Steve Ballmer ran the company. And Microsoft decline happened when Bill left the company, and Steve was running it by himself. Steve was not a technology guy. He was obviously a very, very smart individual, but he was not a technologist. And Microsoft, for the next decade, missed a lot of technology paradigm shifts, to mobile and other technologies. And for a long time, their stock languished until they hired a new CEO. So that's a great example of where the partnership really didn't survive after some time, and the company didn't do well.
Shirish Nadkarni, serial tech entrepreneur and author of From Startup to Exit, an insider's guide to launching and scaling your tech business. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and telling us a little bit about your book. It launches in August. It's available on Amazon or other fine bookstores. Really appreciate you sharing your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. It was a real pleasure to talk about technology and business. That was a great interview. Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks, everyone. Good night.